The Soviets went into Afghanistan in 1979. Since that time, the Mujahideen, or Afghan freedom fighters, have come to regard Peshawar as their capital in exile. There's been no significant drop in the number of human tragedies of this war. Pakistan wonders whether its involvement in a war beyond its borders and beyond its control must continue indefinitely.
I mean, they want to go home. This is the main impression that you get. And they're very grateful for what the Pakistani government is doing for them. And that comes over all the time. I mean, they appreciate how they're being treated, but they do want to go home.
Seen from Peshawar, this frontier city a mere 12 miles east of the Khyber, this is the grim reality and long-term consequence of the war with the Russians in Afghanistan. Patients with spinal injuries come here hoping to be assisted to a resumption of some kind of life. Continuing arrivals are proof that not very far from Peshawar, the fighting is still as fierce if sporadic, and the resistance of the Mujahideen still as determined as when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. This is one of 4 major surgical hospitals in the city. This man, who'd been brought here only a few days ago, lost a leg and suffered severe chest wounds and abrasions caused by shrapnel when he stepped on a Russian mine. Every week, more than 100 patients with all kinds of injuries turn up at this hospital. There's been no significant drop in the number of human tragedies of this war. While the fighting drags inconclusively on just across the border, Peshawar, a historically romantic and often lawless city, attempts to cope with a massive wave of displaced people. The Soviets went into Afghanistan in 1979. Since that time, nearly 3 million Afghans have poured across Pakistan's leaky border. 1/3 of a million of them came to Peshawar and stayed. In less than a year, the population of that city doubled. Today, Peshawar, which has been involved in every tribal skirmish and every declared war since Alexander the Great, is a dusty, bulging Kipling bazaar full of drug dealers and gun runners, freedom fighters and spies. At first, with the help of the United Nations and international relief agencies, Pakistan simply absorbed the refugees. Now, as the guerrilla war in the mountainous regions of Afghanistan shows no sign of being wound down, the military government of General Zia is beginning to show increasing signs of impatience and worry at the never-ending flow of people. The refugees aren't allowed to take jobs or to own land, but making sure they don't is impossible to monitor. The Mujahideen, or Afghan freedom fighters, have come to regard Peshawar as their capital in exile. In countless offices sprinkled across town, they meet regularly to discuss the overthrow of the Soviet-backed regime in Afghanistan. Sensitive to the views of their hosts, they walk around with fewer weapons these days, but there's no shortage of Soviet AK-47 rifles. These may be of little use against Russian tanks, but in the hands of a tribe in which the code is hospitality and revenge, they create a law and order problem. Peshawar's 1/3 of a million refugees are housed in acres upon acres of tents and rude mud huts provided by voluntary agencies operating under the umbrella of the United Nations. Some of these, sprawled across the countryside, have acquired a look of permanence. To live here, refugees must be officially registered, but precise numbers are impossible to come by. What the government would like to do to help overburdened cities like Peshawar is to disperse new and older refugees to camps further away from the border and further inside Pakistan. But that's easier said than done. This tent is further inland, not far from Islamabad, and a full 3 hours drive from Peshawar. And this is where the government would like to house even more refugees. The Mujahideen here all talk bravely about getting anti-aircraft missiles to bring down Soviet helicopter gunships. They tell tall tales of how many Russians they killed. The stories improve with every telling. Like their hopes of getting back to the war, everything here is based more on faith in Allah than on realism. Some of these people may never return to Afghanistan. The relief agencies think they'll be here for a long time. Pakistan wonders whether its involvement in a war beyond its borders and beyond its control must continue indefinitely. Of course, Princess Anne, when she comes here, won't be troubled by these political considerations. She'll be driven through one of these crowded bazaars, and she'll be taken to what's called here a show camp, where the work of the Save the Children Fund has been outstanding. But what her Pakistani hosts are aiming to do, though, is to try to settle what they've increasingly come to regard as an unwinnable war in their own interests and by diplomacy. One of the recent suggestions to emerge from the recently concluded Geneva talks and championed by Pakistan is for the creation of a demilitarized buffer zone between this country and Afghanistan to where all the refugees now here can eventually be sent. That is by agreement with the Russians that there'll be no attacks across that border. That may well suit the Pakistanis and certainly won't please the Americans, though. And it won't please the Mujahideen either, who are pledged to fight every single Soviet soldier until they leave the country. Princess Anne's arrival at the Badabeh refugee camp this morning posed a delicate diplomatic problem. The Pakistani authorities wanted to show their royal visitor how well the camps were administered. The princess was here to see the work of a clinic run by a fund of which she's president. The Islamic tradition, now the dominant force in this country, places all kinds of restrictions on the conduct of women. And on her way to the clinic, the princess passed a group of women patients, anxious to see what was going on without getting too much in the way. The medical superintendent and his assistant explained their respective roles. And the princess was told how the clinic moves to various parts of the camp on different days, dividing itself to serve the 20,000 people who live here. And then, with the mountains of the Hindu Kush and the Khyber Pass in the background, the princess was driven in Land Rover across a muddy riverbed to see an immunization center and what's grandly called here an income generation scheme. Perhaps rather sadly, the refugees in this camp didn't seem to know quite what to make of this extraordinary convoy. And for most of the morning, they stood silently by, bemused and uninvolved. They were kept well back from the official party, looking every inch strangers in a foreign land. The princess continued her tour on foot, walking up a hill to have a closer look at life in the camp. 18 months ago, this site was covered with tents. Now the refugees live in mud huts, hardly distinguishable from the farmers' homes in the area. The elders of the camp said they wanted to meet Princess Anne. The unrehearsed ceremony began with a reading from the Quran, but it then took a surprising turn when one of the elders asked Princess Anne's help in getting weapons to fight the Russians in Afghanistan. The response was discreet.
Telling me yourselves of your troubles and why you came to Pakistan.
I talked to Princess Anne about her visit to the camp. Is there another problem in the fact that Afghans are a very proud people and they haven't been recipients of aid as, say, some people in Africa among whom you've taught recently?
No, I'm not sure that is a problem. In fact, I don't believe they look at it like that. They may not be used to it as such, but they certainly appreciate advances, and they can see, for instance, in the immunisation programme, they were having a certain degree of trouble getting them to accept vaccination against measles. But they had a small epidemic, and of course that, they see the point at once, and it makes a tremendous difference.
And the idea here was also to have the clinics taken away from the camps as well, to make sure the doctors could concentrate on the most serious cases. Has that system worked effectively, you think?
I think I think it has improved the situation. There was obviously a slight tendency. They became rather meeting places in their own rights, and the men liked to come and sit and chat, which wasn't quite what they had in mind, and they didn't seem to be in serious need of medical assistance. And I think the extra walk has perhaps, sifted out a few of the genuine cases from perhaps some of the less genuine cases.
Did you form any other impressions, Your Royal Highness, of the nature of the Afghan problem?
No, not really. I think other than certainly the family I met, and they want to go home, is the main impression that you get. And they're very grateful for what the Pakistani government is doing for them, and that comes over all the time. They appreciate how they're being treated, but they do want to go home.
In what areas would you like to see the work of the Save the Children Fund expand, if that were at all possible?
Here, well, I think it could be expanded in Pakistan in general, in these more distant areas. The sort of mother and child health care that we do can be extended on quite a large scale. And of course there are. I mean, there are something like 280 camps in this province and over 300 altogether. And there are other agencies working, but obviously there is scope for widening our range of work.
You said that the people you met said that they wanted to go home. In some respects, the sort of material benefits and the everything that they get here is in fact perhaps a little superior to some of the problems that that those people are suffering at home at the moment.
I think that from their point of view, the conditions here are probably quite a lot better. But I think what is encouraging at the moment is they do still want to go home, because if it was, if they just sat here and decided this was a splendid place to be, then it would be a huge problem for Pakistan.
Shortly before 11 o'clock this morning, Princess Anne was driven through the historic Jamrud Gate on her way to lunch a mere 6 miles from the border with Afghanistan. The men of the Khyber Rifles provided the armed escort. All tribal traffic on the road was stopped, and the elegant convoy wound its way through the pass, which for centuries has watched the progress of kings and generals and their armies, adventurers and preachers. Today it was considered too risky for the princess to stop too long along the route, and there was a pause to look at British regimental badges carved on the rocks. At the regimental headquarters of the Khyber Rifles, the princess was welcomed by a tribal leader.
And other people.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Welcome, and we are really glad to receive you here. You are the third member of the British royal family who visited this historic place.
Sure, it's only the third.
Other tribal chiefs waited with garlands. Princess Anne was weighed down with the things. The princess was then given 2 gaudily dressed sheep. Acceptance is signified by touching the animals lightly on the head. At Landi Klotel, Katak dancing, a tradition of the area, was performed to say farewell to Princess Anne from Pakistan.